So Image employees want to form a union.
What? Don't laugh.
As plenty of you may have heard, employees at Image Comics decided to form Comic Book Workers United. Yes, this is a union, but no, it's not for who you think it's for. This only applies to the staff at Image Comics. It doesn't apply to any of the creators of the comic books because they're freelancers, so they don't work at Image. Although I didn't really need to tell you that. It would be obvious no artists were involved in this because this is their logo. Why they chose 80s pastels and crosshairs? Don't know. But you should have hired one of those freelancers to design the logo for you. I mean, it's not like their rates are too high. The industry barely pays them, and that's why they, of all people, should have some sort of union or guild. I'm actually surprised that there isn't something similar to the Screen Actors Guild or the Writers Guild for the comic book creators, because there really should be. When you consider all the money made from creators' work by companies, with many creators barely getting royalties, along with the terrible page rates creators get paid for their work, there should be something in place to help balance the situation. It's ridiculous that you can make more money per hour designing business cards fresh out of college than you can making comics, even if you've been in the industry for years. The Comic Book Workers United Union, however, doesn't address that. This is a union for the office workers at Image who feel that they've been taken advantage of. Quote, "For years, comics publishing workers have watched our professional efforts support creators and delight readers. Sadly, we have also watched that same labor be taken for granted at best and exploited at worst. Keeping our heads above water was the new normal before the pandemic, and since its onset, we have been expected to take on even larger workloads with fewer resources. How shitty is it to work at Image Comics?" I have to ask because usually when people want to form a union, the job and work environment sucks. Nobody forms a union when things are going well. They form unions when they think or they are being screwed by businesses. So I think it's fair to ask what the hell is happening in this office, especially that was made worse by the Wu flu. They go on to say, quote, "Our workforce and the comic book and publishing industry as a whole is overtaxed and undervalued. This is detrimental not only to general staff, but also to the creators we are paid to serve and the audiences they in turn work to entertain. I would think that the creators, who barely make enough money to pay their bills, are the ones being overtaxed and undervalued. They're the ones spending hours making books that don't sell. While I'm sure your office job sucks, like most office jobs, you might want to dial it down a little. Our labor is integral to the comic book industry. It requires specialized skills, dedication, and makes quality publishing possible. Or not. Listen, I'm sure you have skills no one has ever imagined, but I promise you, it's highly unlikely that what you're doing is so unique that you're the only ones who can do it." But that's the tone of this entire thing. They're making it sound like they're in the midst of exploitation the likes that hasn't been seen since the Industrial Revolution, and that they're doing this for the creators and readers, which really makes no sense, and you can see that in their list of goals. Some of them are fair, like one in the competitive salary and transparency for job positions, titles, and duties. There are others like the second and third items, asking for staff meetings and management reviews to understand who does what, how well they've done it, and so everyone knows how everything's going. These are basic things that any business should do, which leads back to my question. How shitty is it to work at Image Comics? How dysfunctional is this business when people are requesting something like this, quote, "Increase knowledge retention through the implementation of detailed record keeping and procure documentation for all tasks deemed essential for any given role. These documents are to include detailed and explicit descriptions and instructions for all expected job duties." So you're not tracking how to do the jobs, which would make it difficult for anyone tasked with that position to figure out what to do. Brilliant. It's impractical to run a business like this, especially if someone decides to quit or gets fired and they're the only person who knows how to do that thing. One thing very common in jobs with this problem, though, is that there's no upward mobility. You're stuck in whatever position you were hired for, and the company would rather hire a new person for an open position than promote you, which makes number 5 a nice request, but one that's not likely to happen. If they wanted to promote you, they'd have promoted you. Now, you might be thinking, JSG, you said this was a lesson in cringe, but I don't see any cringe. Come now, you know I don't just make this stuff up. If I say there will be cringe, there will be cringe. Quote, The continuation of remote work for any employee who requested, and the creation of a detailed policy outlining how the company provides reasonable accommodations and supplies for remote employees. I'm just pausing to let it simmer for a minute. You don't want to just jump into it. You gotta let it stew in its own juices for a while. The pandemic has reduced the necessity for the company to pay for essential office space, utilities, etc. With employees in some cases shouldering 100% of the costs that should be shared by the employer, costs such as internet, power, furnishings and other office supplies, computer hardware and related maintenance costs to work from their own personal devices, the company must work out an equitable arrangement for sharing a reasonable percentage of those costs. They did. It's called an office. Let me get this straight. You want to work from home using your personal computer and phone to do business, but you want your job to pay for it. Well, they did. It's called your salary. What the hell are you talking about? They're already paying you. You want to work from home? Fine. But it's not your employer's responsibility to pay for your internet service, and it's not like you're using that much bandwidth to do the job. What, are you using your phone's data plan? You should be covered by whatever service you have to stream Netflix or Hulu or whatever it is you watch. Your business isn't responsible for providing you with furniture and office supplies or maintaining your personal computer. They give you a salary so you can handle that yourself. It's fine if they want to give you a company computer or a phone if it's necessary. But if you're finding that to be an issue, just go to the office. That's why it's there. They follow that petty nonsense up with a request for more staff to reduce the numbers of printing errors and delays and improve marketing, which they really shouldn't have to ask for. This is another thing that's obviously good for business, so unless Image is hurting for cash, this is something they should have done on their own. But that was just a red herring. The Comic Book Workers United deliver the cringe in full force with this, quote, a long-term actionable plan to address the overall lack of diversity in both general staff and management. The authors, artists, and readers who bring comics to life have never been homogenous, and the stories we publish can only be improved by staffing our organization in a way that more accurately reflects the demographics of our creators, our readership, and the nation as a whole. Right. So you tell me exactly how hiring more black, transgender, lesbian furrykins is going to improve your shitty marketing strategies or lack of proofreading. So-called diversity has nothing to do with the situations you've described, but if it does, you have an option. Quit. Image could hire more diverse people if you didn't have the job. So quit. I mean, you're the ones in charge of the processes you just mentioned, so technically y'all would be the bigots if you think any are there. So yeah, quit, and now the bigotry will be gone. And this whole thing is rich given that 6 of the 10 people who signed this thing are women, and those are just the ones with obvious female names. At least 2 of the other people could be women as well, and in all probability, most of these people are whiter than driven snow, so it's the usual suspects. The typical complaint of Karens bitching about diversity and representation, complete with the demand to be able to cancel and blacklist the very creators they claim they support. Quote, renewed commitment to company values through the addition of a collective voting option to immediately cancel publication of any titles whose creators have been found to have engaged in abuse, sexual assault, racism and xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, ableism, etc., until such a time as said creators have engaged in meaningful reparations towards affected persons. Fuck you. I don't even work at Image, but fuck you. How dare you? You think you should have collective voting options to cancel books by creators you don't like. In what world? No. Hell no. No publisher should ever give its office staff the ability to cancel books because they don't like who made the book. You little woke busybodies really need to stop with the authoritarianism and think more than one step ahead. Because I got news for you, pumpkin. Eventually, this little rule will apply in the reverse. Eventually, the political pendulum will swing to the right again, and then you're going to find all those books about gays and trans and blacks and women will suddenly get canceled because they don't coincide with the views of the Christian right you're currently driving into power. Now, it looks like Image decided that they weren't having any of this, so instead of supporting the union outright, they're going to force them to vote among the eligible employees, to which Comic Book Workers United replied, quote, Image Comics has failed to formally acknowledge our request for voluntary recognition. We are interpreting that lack of formal response, coupled with the Twitter post the company made indicating their intention to force us into a totally unnecessary election, as a denial of our request. This is disappointing, given that 10 of the 12 eligible members. Already voted for it. So there's 12 of you. There's just 12 of you. A whole dirty dozen of you are bitching about Image's unfair workspace. I thought there would be more people, honestly. Like at least 30. You got half the short bus of people acting like Image is the worst company on the planet. This is the perfect illustration of everything that's wrong with the woke left. But you know what? More power to them. Some of their demands are reasonable, but that nonsense about representation and canceling creators shouldn't be entertained. If Image wants to go along with it, well, that's on them. I will repeat that I think that the more pressing issue is the lack of support for creators, since they make very little, if any, money from their books. Those are the people who need a union, not these political busybodies. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.